What happens when two dudes, one a retired Navy SEAL commander in Colorado Springs, and the other a hippie meditation teacher in New York City, get together to discuss living mindfully? That's a great question, because we don't know what will happen either. Raw, uncut, and unapologetic. Welcome to Men Talking Mindfulness with co-hosts John McCaskill and Will Schneider. Each week, we take an authentic dive into how mindfulness continually impacts our lives, deepens our relationships, and allows us to be emotionally alive. We filter all of our conversations through the man box, where we unpack how as men we are expected to act in society, how fighting the authentic human experience is exhausting and damaging, and how mindfulness can help. Now, on to the show.
Hey, hello. Welcome back to Men Talking Mindfulness. We have a very special show for you today with Dr. Seth Hickerson is back on Men Talking Mindfulness. Sorry to those of you who are expecting to hear from USC fighter Sarah Alpar today. She had a last-minute scheduling conflict, so she couldn't make it today, so we promised to bring her back another time. So we're going to be with Dr. Seth today. You might remember him from the beginning of this season 3, where he talked about mental fitness. And if you haven't listened yet, it's a great one, so go check it out. Or maybe it's time to re-listen to some of Dr. Seth's great practical wisdom on mindfulness. This is why we love Dr. Seth. He makes mindfulness easily digestible. So in this episode, we are going to talk with Dr. Seth about understanding the importance and the distinction between reacting versus responding to life circumstances. Here's a quote, the kind of onboard reacting versus responding. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. That's from the great Viktor Frankl. So open your mind and your ears and get ready to learn some new mindfulness tools that will help to enhance your life. But before we begin this conversation about reacting versus responding, we have some announcements. What's going on in the Men Talking Mindfulness world, John?
Yeah, well, first off, we have been trying to respond all day, been responding through the night instead of reacting. We got Seth. I see you there, Seth. We're going to bring you up on stage here in a second. But we were flailing at the last second to change this from working with Sarah to working with Seth. Hopefully, those who are here are still going to tune in because we've got a great message on responding versus reacting and how to train your mind to respond versus react. But yeah, we have some announcements. First off, super excited about this one. We've just recently partnered with See Good TV or Conscious Good TV, and that their website is C as in Charlie, cgood.tv. And See Good TV strives to create a streaming experience that delivers inspiring and uplifting content to their members and partner with the world's top conscious filmmakers to deliver the beauty of visual stories. And we're very excited about this. And this month, funny enough, incidentally, we didn't have anything to do with this, but See Good is actually going to be focusing on trauma and addiction. So our very first episode that we're going to be pushing out on See Good TV is with Dr. Rob Kelly, the one that we did about a month ago on that very subject, on trauma and addiction. And then moving on, we have our MTM merch that is still for sale. That sale ends this Sunday. And when I say sale, I don't mean, hey, it's a discount. I mean, the shop actually closes on Sunday, the end of the day on November 7th. We have new holiday soft cotton color shirts in forest green, and they look great. I mean, I personally ordered 2 for myself. And we've got trucker baseball hats, winter hats. And of course, we've got the standard shirts and hoodies. And again, that's mentalkingmindfulness.com/merch. And I'll put that here in the chat here soon. And it helps to support our show. And please spread the MTM love and buy some of our merch. But not only does it support our show, but it supports small businesses, specifically Will's cousin, Rob Schneider. He runs this, and it would be very helpful to support him. It is available in the US and Canada only. But we appreciate your going on there and checking out the merch and perhaps buying some. Thanks so much for supporting Men Talking Mindfulness. So that said, let's get into the guest bio intro, and I'll bring Seth up.
Oh, there he is. Dr. Seth, great to have you back.
Yeah. Always good to be here. I'm good. I'm cold, man. It's like 70 degrees down here in Florida. I had to break out the hoodie. I got
Florida.
the jacket. I mean,
well, hey man, there's MTM hoodies available for those of you down in Florida. for when it gets below 70 degrees down in Florida, you've got some hoodies available.
I send them on down, ship it. Let's go.
Yeah, I have a little hard time sympathizing, Seth. It was the first time it broke below 40 in New York City today. It was 38 when I got up. I was like, oh my God. But it's okay.
I expect no sympathy. I expect no
None.
sympathy.
None from over here. None up, not north of here.
Not at all. Not at all.
Hey, let me give a little. Here's a little. This is our Dr. Seth Hickerson is a innovative educator, coach, entrepreneur, and multi-branch military veteran. He has been training high-performance individuals such as professional athletes. He actually trains Sarah Arpar, who is supposed to be our guest today. But again, we'll have on some other time. He also trains Navy SEALs and business executives for the last 15 years. Dr. Seth is an expert in implementation of mindfulness, emotional intelligence, cognitive fitness, and resiliency training. Seth is dedicated to providing access to practical tools, tips, and techniques that enhance self and situational awareness, reduce stress, and improve performance. And this is why we love having you here, Dr. Seth. Thank you so much for coming on today. We're going to be talking about reacting versus responding. So good to have you. How are you feeling today?
I'm good. And it's funny, every time I hear the bio read, I'm always like, oh man, that sounds good. Now I want to tell everybody to lower your expectations. Okay, let's get real, right?
Right.
But no, I'm doing good. I'm just kind of down here and doing my thing in Florida and hanging out, and glad able to get on here. Any chance I get to talk with you guys, I'm always game, especially when we're talking about the My Steady Mind OG Viktor Frankl.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about that's the guy that kind of really kicked all this off. He's the ultimate MSM coach, in my opinion. And so any chance I get to talk about that gap and what he's about, I'm all for. So
yeah. Well, it worked out. In Sarah not being able to be here, you stepped in to fill the gap here in Men Talking Mindfulness in the last second. And we'll get into, a little bit more about you, because I know you were on the show a few months back, but for those who may have missed it, we'll just get a quick little bit more about you before we get into the questions and everything else. But before we do that, we're going to do like we do on every show and kick it off with a grounding practice so that we can respond better rather than reacting, and live in a responsive mode rather than a reactionary mode. So that said, if you're watching, if you're listening, get into a comfortable position, whatever that looks like for you, and make sure it's safe. Obviously, I'm going to kick my flip-flops off. It is cooler here, but I'm still rocking flip-flops because that's what I do. And I'm going to put my feet firmly on the ground. I'm going to put my hands on my lap, and I'm going to close my eyes. But you assume that comfortable position, whatever that may look like for you. And let's bring our attention to our breath, focusing exclusively on the physical sensations of breathing and nothing else. And to really heighten that attention, let's begin by doing 3 focused breaths together, focused and intentional, deep belly breaths. Begin by breathing out all your air, bringing your navel to your spine. Breathing in deep, in through your nose if you're able. Hold at the top and relax. And as you breathe out, focus on that air leaving your body. Focus on the contracting of the lungs and belly. And at the bottom, hold again. Breathe in again, in through your nose if you're able, paying attention to the air entering your body, the expansion of your lungs, expansion of your belly. Hold at the top and relax, letting it go nice and slow. Slow. One more. Deep in through your nose if you're able. Hold at the top. And let it go nice and slow. Slow. Now just feel yourself in this space. Feel your feet on the ground. If you're sitting down, feel the chair against the back of your thighs, your hamstrings, your buttocks. Feel your hands resting on your thighs. And just be aware of the space you're in and how you feel in your mind, how you feel in your body, and how your nervous system feels. If your mind has wandered off, just gently bring it back without any judgment. Just notice that your mind has wandered off and bring it back to this practice, this grounding practice. Bring your attention back to the physical sensation of being in this space right here, right now. And let's finish with one deep cleansing breath together. Begin again by breathing out all your air, bringing your navel to your spine. Breathe in deep in through your nose. And relax. Breathing out nice and slow, slow, slow. And when you're ready, bring some movement back in your body. Maybe rotate your head around a little, blink your eyes open if they were closed. And here we are, Man Talking Mindfulness. Let's get into this again. Seth, great to have you, brother.
Great to be here, and always great to do that. I hadn't done my little morning meditation yet, so it was good to get that little grounding.
There you go. There you go, man. Grounding.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's good stuff for sure.
So at the very beginning there, Will, read a quote that many of us are familiar with from Viktor Frankl, and he's for those who don't know who he is, he's was an Austrian neurologist, psychiatrist, philosopher, and author, and a Holocaust survivor. And arguably, his most famous work is Man's Search for Meaning. And the quote that we're using to focus today on reaction versus response is, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. So we are here to talk about response instead of reaction, and really want to get into what those mean, what living in a responsive versus reactionary mode feels like, looks like, and talk about all that. But again, Seth, let's give 2 or 3 minutes, quick, a little bit more than what we read in the bio, just for our listeners again to know who you are and why this particular topic is so near and dear to your heart.
Yeah, I mean, this is really what it all comes down to is understanding that. About my background, right? I've been into mindfulness for a long time, practitioner. It's saved my life. It's changed my life. The C stream or whatever it was you were talking about, that new channel, is something I'd love to check out, because I personally dealt with a lot of personal trauma, personal addiction, and just I've been through it. I've dealt with it, being a veteran, all the stuff we go through. And I've just been fortunate through my education and experiences to kind of come up with some tools that help me stay sober and sane. And if it works for me, it can work for others. And being doing my studies in sports psych and studying, neurology and the brain, I really understand like what it means, and how important what Viktor's talking about is that gap. And so that's what a lot of our training is teaching people how to do. And I say training a bunch, right? Because that's what it takes. You can't just go read Man's Search for Meaning and be a new person. You have to do things, right? And so that's what I like to talk about and kind of help people understand it. I like to kind of take what, complex things and make them simple and applicable, and hopefully we can explain some of what Viktor's talking about in this episode so that people can relate to it, and then more importantly, have some tools to help them go and create that gap.
One thing for this conversation I'd like to bring in is to get situational, in the sense of like, what does it look like when we react in our families, in our work life, in our community, so really kind of make it relatable, and then flip it and then come into like, what does it mean to respond almost in those same circumstances? So we can really begin to make that distinction. So I guess our audience could really, digest like, oh, wait, okay, this is something that I really need to pay
Right.
attention to.
Yeah.
And then it's also, and then how do I begin to practice that
Yep.
after kind of getting these downloads from our show right now?
Mhm.
So why don't we, John, should we bring up that graphic first?
Yeah, let's do it. So,
there?
incidentally, Seth sent this out to a bunch of the coaches for My Steady Mind this week, and I just thought it was so appropriate to bring it up. So it's basically, if you're listening to the show and not watching it, it has life without mindfulness at the very top, and then life with mindfulness at the bottom. And basically, without mindfulness is you have a stimulus and you immediately go into a reaction. So that's what life is like without living mindfully. And then at the bottom, with mindfulness, you have a stimulus, and then you have all these different ways to basically assess that stimulus. And then you have, after you've assessed that stimulus and taken that pause that we're going to be talking about today, and we've already been talking about, you go into a skillful response. Man, I get tongue-tied sometimes.
Easy for you to say.
Right? So yeah, let's talk about this graphic. Let's talk about living mindfully in these different spaces that Will talked about in our families. I'll take the graphic down now just so we can have our pretty faces, or at least yours, Seth, and Will. So let's talk about those spaces. So I mean, I'll kick it off with in my life, in the family space, where if I react versus respond. So again, I get a stimulus of, I don't know, my little boy knocking something over, right? And that can be a stimulus that is drives a quick thought. One, the thought is, what the heck just dropped? To the emotion is, why did he push that over? And the action is to yell at my little boy about pushing something over. Now, my little boy is 2. Okay. So the reaction there is not really appropriate to be yelling at my little boy who's 2 years old for knocking something over. Whereas, flipping that, if I was to see the stimulus is he's knocked something over, take a second and take that breath, even if it's a split second, and take a breath and be like, okay, what happened? Okay, He knocked over a table, big freaking whoop, no big deal, right? Now my thought is, okay, he's knocked over a table. Is he okay? Is everything in this room okay? Now my emotion is, okay, everyone is okay. And now the action that is driven by taking that pause, a new thought, a new emotion, the new action that is driven is like, hey, come here, son. Are you okay? Let's not push over tables. Let's not do that kind of thing. And obviously that's an anecdote, but that applies in my family life all over the place, whether it's with my kids, with my spouse, just with myself. Even I can get seriously pissed off at myself. And what does that do for me? So yeah, I'd love to kick over to you guys for, your examples of where living in a reactionary state can really be detrimental.
Well, maybe Seth, it might be good to break down. We talked about it in your mental fitness episode. Just to add some context here, is that STIA process, and just kind of really break down some of the mechanics here, and then maybe really begin to look at what is this gap, right? What the fuck is this concept of the gap?
Yeah.
So
I love it.
Dr. Seth.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I wanted. I help people. I want them to understand what this stuff is neurologically, how it works, what we're trying to protect, right? And so essentially the gap is your free will. No shit. That's what it is, right? If you do not have a gap, and Viktor, because this is what a lot about Viktor was talking about, that he witnessed being in the Holocaust. People were dying, right? I mean, there's executions and stuff, but plenty of people were dying just because they lost hope. Their will was gone, right? And so it's this, all our brain wants to do is take action. Our brain is a action achieving machine. And every thought we have is an instruction, right, for that action. And the way our brain, a person's mindset, I help people understand this too, because there's a lot of, mindset coaches out there that have no idea how a brain works, right? And I'll ask them, I'll say, hey, what makes up a mindset? And if they can't tell me anatomically, neurologically, physiologically how a brain is made up, your mindset is a result of billions of neural pathways that have formed. Those neural pathways create neural bundles. Those neural bundles make up neural networks. And that series of neural networks is the anatomical structure of your brain. That's your brain set. And your mindset is a result of your brain set, right? So if people say they're mindset coaches and they can't answer it like that, they're really just a motivational speaker. No offense. No offense.
No.
Yeah. If you don't have the ability to change it and update it, right? And you have to understand all of it is a result of this neurological process called STIA, right? Mm-hmm. Stimulus creates a thought. Thought creates an emotion. Emotion is energy in motion, emotion, and that's what drives action. So everything a human being does is driven by a feeling, by an emotion. You know, we think our logical brain makes us make decisions. It's our feeling brain. We have a thinking and a feeling brain. We make decisions with emotions and we justify with logic, right? So that's the way we work. That's how we're wired. So this STIA process, and the first letter in STIA is stimulus.
Yeah, can I ask Dr. Seth? So this STIA process, this is the way that we're all kind of designed, like based on our mindsets, based on our brain set, right? Yeah. There's like, so stimulus is some sort of external something, like a loud noise, or anything, you see, you know, your son knock over a table, or you know, and then we cascade into a thought, right? Typically, right? And then there's an emotional response based on that thought. So we're kind of connecting the thinking and the emotion together. And then, you know, because what you said earlier, we're action machines. So we want to do something. Right. And this is this natural progression that all human beings go through. And then we'll talk about how mindfulness can help. But is that correct in what I'm saying?
Yeah. I mean, the brain and body are very simple once you understand them. And if you have a brain, this is how it works, barring any defects or anything, right? I mean, some people's brains are different, right? But I'm just talking about the general human being. I mean, how we live and evolve is very simple once you understand the basic functions of the mind and body. And so, you know, I want to talk about a bunch of things because I love this topic and it's very important for people to understand. And so the first thing, coming back to the gap and what I said about free will. So if you imagine this, all our brain is doing is the world. It's these neural pathways are trying to form all the time based on stimulus. And we as humans receive stimuli a couple ways. One way we receive it is through our senses. So sight, taste, touch, feel, smell, hear, right? So if I see something, hear something, taste something, feel something, that's a stimulus, right? And then, but that has to go through the prefrontal cortex and make its way down into the limbic brain where the action lives. So we receive it through our senses. The way humans receive stimulus first and faster is through limbic resonance, through energy transfer, right? When we feel something, right? People put off energy, everything's vibrating. And so we all know that, right? We can talk about that. Trust your gut, right? We got billions of bacteria that line our stomach and our gut, and people can walk by you. You can be in a room and you can feel the energy in that room, right? Good or bad. So that's all. As humans, we're processing stimuli. And then every resulting thought is based on our perception of that stimulus, right? And so if unaware people that don't have mindfulness, which is was certainly me for many, many years, and it's probably still a lot of people out there listening, right? There's no gap between a stimulus and a thought. So what that means is you are at the mercy of all stimulus, right? You do not have free will. If you do not have a space between a stimulus and a thought, like Viktor said, you do not have we say it kind of laughing, like, oh, it's your ability to respond. I mean, this is what I'm talking about. If you don't have that space, you don't have free will. You're a
slave to your emotions,
to everything, to every stimulus out there, right? Yeah. And so then what that does to humans, and this is why we have so much mental fatigue and exhaustion and depression and you name it, right? Burnout, because people don't have that gap. They don't have any awareness, you know, so they're at the mercy of all stimulus. We live in a world designed to use negative stimulus to influence this process, right? And so if I'm this person and I don't have a gap and I'm at the mercy of all this stimulus, what that means is people just wake up and they're perceiving stuff as threats all the time. That bad email, my kid that knocked over a table, that driver that cut me off, the person that didn't like my Facebook post, whatever, right? And so it just means they exist in sympathetic overdrive. People are just in survival mode the time they get out of bed.
Right.
And so that's exhausting. right? And that's how most people just try to live. And so you have to start to understand this neurological process. You have to really get a new relationship with all stimulus. And then you have to do something to create a space, the pause, the gap between a stimulus and a thought, so that whatever the stimulus comes, if it's a shitty negative stimulus, I want to create space to then change my perception of it from good to bad, so I can have a good thought, emotion, action.
Right.
And that, go ahead.
No. So this perception too. I mean, so where these perceptions come from? Is it something that, that is learned, or it's
negativity
already,
bias?
Kind of negativity bias. So this is like, so if I have, if I come from a family, with an abusive father or something like that, or I'm always being treated a certain way, or So just talk about, perception, because we're, that perception is really like what we're trying to, that's right, trying to change in order to, so please, if you would, just to help us understand this idea, or what perception is.
Everything we're trying to do, I talk about this all the time, right? When I train people or athletes, every human being, there's two things that controls everything in our life: our thoughts, which control our mind, and our breath, which controls our nervous system. Most people live their whole life with no awareness or control over either, right? And that sucks. And so what we're doing through training is we're starting to learn how to control mindfulness, metacognition, thinking about our thinking, starting to control, have awareness of our thoughts first, creating space so I can then change my perception of it, so I can influence, and then the whole thing we're trying to do also is recalibrate our nervous system. That's it, and that's the simplicity of what it is. And so
creating a new perception, then, you know what I mean, of ourselves and ourselves in this world, and ourselves relating to other beings and people.
100%. So totally, updating your mind like you update your phone. And this is what we talk about at My Steady Mind. It's because of neuroplasticity that lets us literally change who we are and how we see the world through specific training like we do. And so the example I give, and there's a great book called Stop Doing That Shit by John Bishop, I think, which you should all read, right? There's two he wrote. One is called Unfuck Yourself, and one is called Stop Doing That Shit. And what he talks about
we got these names.
These are the books I read now. There's other stuff.
Stop doing that shit and unfuck yourself. Just so we're very clear that these are books that you can buy anywhere. I love it.
Buy them both, right? It's an awesome guy. He's big on, I was supposed to actually hook up with him and meet him. John Gary Bishop, I think is his name. But anyway, he's out of London. But he's an OG like us. He's a brain guy, but he tells it as it is. We don't try to beat people over the head with the academics of it. We don't try to sound super smart, right? It's like, here's the way it works, and here's why you're fucked up. And if you want to unfuck yourself, you have to know this. So what he uses in this book, right? So when human beings are born, when all of us are thrown into this world, the term he uses is called your throwed-inness. I don't know if that's British or what, but that's what he calls your throwed-inness. So when all of us on this, and every one of your listeners, when we were born, we were thrown into this world. Our brain and our body are thrown into this world, and instantly our brain is starting to develop. And how our brain develops is 100% contingent on the stimulus around us, right? And so that's your throwed-inness. And we couldn't decide to be male or female or black or white or come from a good home or a bad home or an alcoholic home, or right. There's all these variables that we just got thrown into that we didn't have any control over, right? And so as that human is progressing, right, our brain is developing, these neural pathways are all forming based on that kid's experience and exposure to stimuli. And it's forming who that person is. It's forming the structure of their brain, right? And these kids don't have awareness. Right.
Perceptions, right?
Right. So what happens is you get to a point where you're 15, 20, 25 or whatever. And if you're fucked up or whatever you're struggling with, right, it's not necessarily your fault. It's the way your brain has been wired based on everything you've had exposure to with no awareness up until that point, right? And then what we're saying is through what we do, which is proactive neuroplasticity training, you can go in and start to identify that subconscious shit, right? That self-sabotaging behaviors and through neural pruning, break those old neural pathways and then form new ones. So you can totally transform who you are by doing this, but you have to understand the STIA process, stimulus, motion, action. You have to do something. That's why self-help books don't work. That's why motivational speaking doesn't work. That's why none of that stuff, that's not training. You have to take action.
Well, it's like reading a physical fitness book, right? Hey, I'm
Yeah,
going to read all day and
right.
get
I mean,
huge
like,
and get fast and get
yeah,
in so much better shape. You got to take action.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what people don't understand. And people don't understand mental fitness training, because my body, if I'm deconditioned, right, I can look and see that, man, my ass is out of shape. I look like shit, right? I can see it. And then I say, okay, well, I'm going to go work out. And if you haven't worked out, if you're deconditioned, you know, again, I can't read a book about working out. I can't be on a show talking about how important working out is. I got to get my ass up, go to the gym, pick up the dumbbell, and do the curls. And it sucks. It sucks. I hate it. I'm making excuses not to do it because I'm deconditioned, right? And I don't see results instantly. I'm just like, ugh. So then I leave, and then I got to come back the next day, and it still sucks, and I still hate it, and I'm making excuses, but I'm doing it, right? Yeah. And you do that for 2 months or whatever, and then all of a sudden, oh my gosh, I see a little muscle in there, you know? Yeah. And now my perception changes to, now I don't see that one thing as a threat. I see it as an opportunity. So now I'm not making excuses not to go. I'm making reasons to go. Right. And so mental fitness training is the same way. The problem is we can't see our brain getting stronger because it doesn't grow like a bicep. It's got a skull around it. You know, if it grew like our bicep, everybody on this call would have a big ass head because we train.
Right? I wouldn't fit on the screen, Seth. Like, I wouldn't be here.
Cognitive fitness, cognitive fitness, mental skills training doesn't work that way. It grows, it changes through new neural development and breaking old ones. And so that's why a lot of people just don't believe it, you know, or don't think it works because I can't see it, right? But you feel it. You feel it, but you may not feel it at first, right? You're not going to become a Jedi Master the first time you sit down and try to meditate, right? And that's what I help people in our country, especially, who are like, Seth, I did a 5-minute guided meditation. Why am I not the Dalai Lama? I'm like,
why am I not levitating?
Why am I not levitating?
Yeah. Like, and also even that the person you're speaking to, they're literally speaking and working and feeling and acting from that reactive mind, from the perception of being like, oh, I can't change, or I've tried it once, you know, to change, and things don't change. Right. So there's a lot of things that we're kind of working against here. I don't like to think of like battling, but like,
it's the negativity bias. And that's what our brains, we talk about. Like, the reason this stuff's hard, and the reason is because it's not because you're a bad person. I mean, it's not because it's just your brain. You have to understand how your brain works, you know, and it's people's egos that make them think, no, Seth, you don't know. I'm different. No, you're not. You're not, you know, this is how your brain is designed. And we have to learn how to outsmart our own psychology.
Right. And you talked about neuroplasticity. And for those who are not familiar with that term, that's the ability of the brain to change, to rewire. There's a great video on it on YouTube where a guy learns how to ride a bike that is actually engineered backwards, to where when you hit the handlebars, it goes left. When you try to go left, it goes right, and vice versa. And how impossible it is to learn to ride that bike. But he takes months and months to learn it, rewires his brain of what the neural pathway for riding a bike is. And then he gets on a regular bike and he can't do it because he's actually changed his brain through neuroplasticity. And we can do that. And you know, something else I want to talk about, Seth, you brought up, one, you know, we have these stimuli all over the world, right? All through our day, but not only can we inject a pause after the stimulus and in between the stimulus and the thought, but we can also, in some capacity, change the stimuli that we're exposed to. So, you know, the first thing so many of us do is so many of us sleep with our phone right next to our bed, and we use our phone as our alarm clock. That alarm clock goes over, we roll over, and what's the first thing we do? I'd love to see people chat in the chat right here to see what the first thing people do is. Most people, they check social media, they check email before they even get out of bed. They're on their phone checking to see what came in. So that's a stimulus that you may be able to control through your day. So not only do you take a pause in between stimulus and thought, but you can also control the stimuli that you're exposing yourselves to. The other thing that you said, Seth, that I want to dig into is you said that so much of the world capitalizes off this wiring, the way that
Right.
we're wired, that negativity bias.
Yeah.
And like news media, social media, they capitalize off that because they know
How your
what the
brain
stimulus is going to. Yeah. So that's why we see so much more bad news on the
Right.
news, is because, hey, that's a
Right.
stimulus. We're going to,
Right.
what's the thought is, oh, we
Yeah.
want to
Yeah.
see that. So
Yeah.
I'll
Yeah.
turn it back over
Yeah,
to you. Shut up.
And that's why it's called, I should be called, this is a new definition of capitalism. You know, like capitalizing on our weaknesses. Seriously, that's why we buy stuff. You know, that's why we panic shop. That, you know what I mean? Because it's like literally they're playing on this negativity bias. But please roll with it, Seth.
Dude. I mean, that's why I do what I do, right? And I got a lot I can dive in on there and explain. I mean, this is, why I'm so passionate about it, and I say this, right, especially being a veteran, right? Like I took an oath a couple times, right, to support and defend this country against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And what I'm doing in my business is defending our country against domestic terrorism, right?
Wow.
That's what I'm doing. I didn't stop serving this country just because I got out of the military, right? This is my defense against domestic terrorism, because our country, I love it to death, right? I love capitalism, but this country's hyper capitalism, which means it's designed to try to literally extract as much money out of our citizens from birth until death. And we use systems to make sure that happens, right? I mean, that's what I talk about my doctorate in educational leadership, right? Our school systems there's no funding for things like music, art, dance, PE, mental health. There's no funding for that because that's what stimulates divergent thought. There's no money in healthy, independent thinking people. We say, no, it's all about IQ. It's about standardized testing, right? That's what's going to get you successful. That's what's going to get you the career. So you suppress and eliminate divergent thinking. And then all a person has is convergent thinking. So the byproduct is called learned helplessness. So our kids and all of us, we're graduating from high school. We may have a 4.0 and a full ride, but we don't know how to do shit ourselves. We're dependent on the government. We're dependent on a politician. We're dependent on a pharmaceutical company to fix me, right? And that's by design, right? So
and I'll continue living through that stimulus response, or stimulus reaction. We're always like boom, boom. And there's no again, it's that gap. Like we're trying to find that gap, and that's divergent thinking. That's mindfulness. That's awareness.
Right. So nobody knows how. And then so what happens is, again, like what do we say? All human being, every action is based on an emotion. And so if we're not teaching people this kind of stuff in schools, which we're not by design, right? If you do not know how to, and this is where shit got sideways with me and probably a lot of us, right? If you're not taught how to manage an emotion, the only thing you can do is suppress it. That's it. You can manage it or suppress it. That's all you can do with emotions. And if you do not, my tool for all my emotions, because I did not know how to manage them, was alcohol. I drank when I was happy. I drank when I was sad. I drank when I just drank, right? And that became my tool. And it was, that was fun for a little while. I don't remember the 90s, but, but I also shot myself in the foot and screwed a lot of stuff up until I kind of learned. And then I got sober, and then I started practicing some of this stuff. And so now my emotional toolkit, I mean, I say it all the time, it's psychological warfare out there, and everybody's unarmed. They're unarmed. Right.
And well, unless you start practicing mindfulness, right?
That's
unless
you start, right. That's exactly it. So coming back to what we're trying to help people understand is, I mean, everything that you do is a result of this STIA process, and everything you feel and what you believe. And so talking about how our society capitalizes on it, right? And if your viewers aren't familiar with it, or if you guys aren't, like, go Google the attention economy. Right? Like, that's when I talk about this domestic terrorism, all these tech companies and all these things out there, they do not give a shit about you. All they want, your clicking, your spending, whatever it is. And so they know how to create stimuli that will influence your thoughts and emotions and actions, because they know you don't have awareness of it and you don't have defense against it. And so that's what sucks, right? And they use sensationalism. So what John was talking about, and what I talk about in our training and helping people understand, is the two most valuable resources every human being on the planet has. Two most valuable things you possess is your time and your attention. You can't go to Amazon and buy more time or attention. Probably the only two things Amazon doesn't sell. Right? And so we have to protect our time and attention like gold, because we live in a society that is designed to capture, capitalize, and monetize both, right? And so what they do, for example, it's all about influencing the STIA process. So where do most people spend a lot of their time and attention? news, television, social media, right? So if any of us, and so what I help people understand is it's not necessarily the people on the news that are the bad people. They're just reading prompts, right? And scripts. It's the content creators that know. I mean, they work with neurologists, they work with human behavior specialists. Everything down to the colors and things are designed to capture and influence, to use a stimulus to influence a thought. Because I know once I have your thoughts, I've got your emotions and your actions, period. Right. There's two types of people in the world: conditioners or conditioned.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I think it's funny how these platforms you mentioned before in your resilience training, how they there's only two entities out there that call their people users, right? Mm-hmm. And that's the drug industry and the tech industry.
That's right.
Wow. I've never thought about that.
That's the only two that call and it's drug industry and tech industry. And these are designed to be more, this stuff's designed to be more addicting than drugs. Right. And there's studies out there that show that, right? I want to come back and talk about sensationalism, but I'm a nerd, right? So I geek out on research and stuff like that. And there's studies that to prove this point, right? There was one where they took a heroin addict, a 20-year heroin addict, and brought him in a room in a lab. He didn't know what he was coming in there for. And they hooked him up and probably told him he was going to do something, right? Get free heroin for a year. I don't know. But they brought him in and they had him hooked up. And then they just walked in and said, hey, we're going to take your heroin away for 24 hours. To just see how his brain lit up, the stress response, the fear response in his brain by hearing that he was not going to have his heroin. And you can imagine it lit up. That guy was stressed, scared, right? Saying, I'm not going to have my heroin. Then they did the same thing with a 15-year-old female where they walked in the room and said, hey, you're not going to have your phone for 24 hours. And the fear and the stress response lit up more powerful than the heroin addict.
Wow.
Right? That's how powerful this stuff has become, especially if we've got kids. This shit's not a joke. That's why our mental health, depression, suicide, you name it's skyrocketing, right? And so how they do that is, again, they understand the STIA process. They know that most people have no awareness of stimulus, and they know that most people have no gap between a stimulus and a thought. So if I'm Jane Doe and I'm just sitting at home or whatever, and I turn on the news, right? The news uses
quote unquote.
Yeah, there's nothing new about the news. Nothing.
Yeah, nothing. That is not what. If you want to know what's going on in the world, walk out your fucking front door.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
talk to your neighbor.
Right. Don't look up at a screen and see something that's happening 4,000 miles away that they're sensationalizing. And so that's what happens is the news uses, it's called fear-based sensationalism. And so what that means is if any of us right now, first let me come back to this, right? Stimulus. So why they use sensationalism is they understand everything a person does in their life is based on a stimuli, right? Because that's where thoughts come from, emotions and actions. And they know that our human brains are still pretty primitive. Our brains haven't evolved like technology has. And human beings operate on two levels of awareness, conscious awareness and subconscious awareness. And all human beings, every time we get out of bed and we wake up in the morning and we start our day and we walk out our front door, we're scanning the environment for three stimuli. We're on hyper lookout for three stimuli. And those three stimuli are, can I eat it? Can I fuck it? Can it kill me? That's what we're looking for, right? Can I eat it for survival, right? We're just scanning and this made sense back in the day, where we came out and we had to go look and see if I could find stuff to eat for survival. Can I sleep with it for reproduction? I got to find a mate so we can reproduce, right? And then can it kill me so I don't become extinct? That's the stimulus that our brains are still constantly kind of looking for. It takes priority, right, over all other stimulus. And the one that of those three, the one that gets the highest priority is, can it kill me? Right. So what news media does and is using fear-based sensationalism. If any of us went and turned on again the news right now, any station, I don't care what your leaning is, I don't care about your politics, I don't give a shit about any of that. Go turn on the news. And what you will see is a good-looking reporter, usually a female, talking about death, destruction, and violence somewhere in the world, followed by cheeseburger commercials. Right?
Yeah.
That's the holy trinity of stimulus that will stop a human in their tracks and make them look at the screen, right? You could just be walking down the sidewalk, having a great day, feeling awesome, and a department store has a screen on and breaking news, 25 dead in Bangladesh. It's just all whatever's on there, the reds, the colors, right? You'll stop and look at that. You'll freeze and you're looking at the screen thinking you're watching the news, but all they're doing is using stimulus to keep you on that screen for as long as possible. So the ratings go up And
Right.
now I know once I've got that person glued to my screen, I've got their thoughts, their emotions, and their actions. Now I can influence their spending, their voting, whatever I want. Right.
Yeah.
And so that's the tactic they use. And then what that does to the person, right, is by watching the news, now I'm scared. I'm worried. I don't want to talk to strangers. I don't want to travel. I don't want to fly. I want to stay home. I don't want to come out. I don't want to challenge anybody. So it's conditioning you, right, to just stay in your box. And then, so I feel fearful. Now the person's like, oh my God, no more news. I'm going to go just look at Facebook or Instagram, right? Mindlessly. We don't do anything mindlessly, right? And so now I come over here. And so I use Instagram as an example. What was Instagram when it first started?
Just photos, right?
Of
Just
what?
food,
Photos
I think.
Food. Yeah. Instagram was just photos of food. Human beings cannot not look at pictures of food.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're scrolling on Facebook or whatever, and then all of a sudden you see a triple cheeseburger. You stop, right? You lock in on it. And so I still do it, right? We just have to have awareness that these are the stimuli that get our attention.
Right.
So then Instagram turned into pictures of sex.
Yeah.
Right. And so
yoga.
Media,
I'm just kidding.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Check out this downward dog. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So they use fantasy-based sensationalism, but how it affects us, the person, right, is I'm scared because of what I see on TV, and I'm less than because of what I see on social media. Because I'm not as pretty. I don't have the great recipes. I'm not taking the vacation.
Play on your weaknesses.
Right. So that's why so many people out there have so much state anxiety, state depression, is because that's what we're spending our time and attention on. And now I tell people all the time, once you become a mindful practitioner, you start to understand stimulus, you start to have tactics to create that gap. Like, I want you to be able to use social media. I'm not saying don't watch the news. I tell people, they're like, am I supposed to stop watching the news? I'm like, read a newspaper. If you want the news, go read a newspaper. Cut out all that extra shit,
just go read. Well, what are some other ways that we can begin to flip? Like, we've kind of went down the rabbit hole of the gloom and doom and the negativity bias and how we are wiring this to a process. But, how do we mindfully, what are some simple, practical ways that we can begin to find that gap?
Right.
And ways that we can begin to rewire our perception of the world. Does everything really need to be a threat? Is it and one thing that's helped me in the past, and it's through my yoga training, I was asked to go, and I've done this a few times now, no news, no media, nothing for a week. And it's just whoa. And it's who am I? After even that first day, it's whoa, I'm what do I do with that time? That usually would suck my attention away. So how do we begin to find that gap? If it's the first time that someone's ever listened to this podcast or actually starts to think about mindfulness in action, what are some simple things they can do in order to take those first steps?
Yeah, there's a couple of them. And we teach a bunch in the My Steady Mind training, right? I mean, that's all we're doing is trying to introduce people to tactics, biohacks that we call them, biohacking techniques to create that space or redirect your thoughts. And so the two that I use the most is the BAMO breath, right? Breathe and move on. And that's the first breath technique we teach. Because again, remember, we're just trying to control our nervous system. And so if I get hit with a negative stimulus, whether it's an email or a screaming kid, I like to use the example kind of like John. I mean, I'm a single dad with 3 boys. I got an 8-year-old, a 6-year-old, and a 4-year-old. I can be cruising in my car and they're behind me and everything's good. Then all of a sudden they start fighting or screaming or whatever, right? That's a stimulus. And instantly it pisses me off, right? That's a negative. But if I was untrained, and I still can do this is never about perfection. It's just about probability, increasing the probability that I do a better thing more than a bad thing. So if I was unaware, my kids are screaming and I've done this, right? I turn out, would you shut the hell up? My God, what the hell are you up? Right? That's,
is that what you sound like, Seth? Is that what you're doing there?
Yeah. I will still do it. I've done it. Right. But instead, if they're screaming and if that's a negative stimulus, I hear the screams. And if I can take one BAMO breath, create that space, now I'm more likely to turn around and just say, hey guys, can you just quiet down for a minute? Right. Just that simple thing. But that's what life is. It's a series of those things, right? The small things become the big things. So the BAMO breath is one, which is a 4-second inhalation, breathe and move on. I think we might've talked about it last episode, but
we definitely did.
Yeah. BAMO, breathe and move on. So a negative stimulus, whether it's a bad email, somebody didn't like my Facebook post, whatever, take a breath and then reframe it, right? And then the other thing, so BAMO breath is a good way. The other thing I love, and another tactic that I use that we introduce in the course in our emotional intelligence module, and it's a tactic that Jocko, the good technique, so the good technique.
Yeah. For those who are not familiar, Jocko Willink, fellow Navy SEAL, just a straight badass, but also has a great way of thinking through things, and that's what you're going to get into here.
Yeah. So I don't even know if Jocko knows what he's doing when he uses this good technique, but what he's doing is, so he says in his video, and it's a great one on YouTube. You can go to YouTube and just type in Jocko good, and it'll come up and you can watch it. But what he's doing is he's talking in the video. He's like, hey, every time a subordinate or one of my people comes up to me and they want to give me bad news, they always say the same thing. Like, they know what you're going to say, Jocko. You're going to say good, right? And so what he's doing is, if somebody comes and brings you bad news, right? Like somebody, hey, the mission got canceled, right? That's not good news. But what he will say, so that's a negative stimulus. And instead of him, so he creates space by saying good, right? So good deflects it. So it goes into a positive thought, positive emotion and action. He's deflecting it. So he's not perceiving it as a threat. He's perceiving it as an opportunity. Right. So if somebody comes and says, hey, mission got canceled, and he didn't have the, he may, what the hell? That's bullshit. I can't believe they canceled this mission. Yeah. You're the leader, right? You're setting in. So now he knows it's not good. He didn't want the mission to get canceled, but they come and say mission got canceled. He says good. And just that split second puts him in a position to see, well, what's the opportunity in it? Right. What's the opportunity?
Exactly.
Gives us time to get better. Gives us time to train more. And that's what we're doing. So the BAMO breath and the good technique, you can thank it, you can say it, whatever, but it's a mechanism for creating space and changing your perception of what would normally be a negative stimulus to a positive one.
I like a way of filtering the world, right? So it's like, what I love what Jocko does, and thank you for bringing up that video, and I watched it, I really enjoyed it. Like, if everything is good, he just kind of isolates it and puts it, just instead of it being like, oh my God, this is going to totally screw up my life or my situation, whatever. It's just like, boom, I just kind of isolate it into good. Yeah. And a sense of good, in the sense of there's opportunity here. Everything. Right. Instead of going into the negativity bias, we're like, oh my God, everything's ruined. I did this. And what about that? And instead of being like, hey, there's something here. And if I take a moment, right, with the BAMO breath, and just slow myself down and get a chance to analyze, the opportunity and the good that's whatever that circumstances is, then I'm going to be more effective. And here, that's that whole in that gap. Then that good is the gap.
Well,
right?
literally,
and that,
last night when Sarah told us that she wasn't going to be able to do this, like, Will and I texted one another, and our first text to one another was, Will texted me and he said shit, and I texted him and I said fuck. And then I was like, all right, let's take a second. Let's think about this. What can we do? And we turned it into an opportunity, but we even though we know, like you said, none of us are perfect, right? We still,
no, it's never perfect, right?
But we realized that, hey, we were reactionary in our reaction. And then we're like, okay, let's turn this into an opportunity. We have Seth back on. And here we are. I mean, and sharing great information. Yeah. And I also want to talk about BAMO. You talked about using it. Okay, your kids are yelling or whatever stimulus is there, a negative stimulus, and you feel like you need to react, but you inject a BAMO breath, a breathe and move on. But you can't just do that without having done it before. So you have to train to use that. Right. And so doing it.
Thank you, John.
In a calm setting at home, when there's no negative stimulus, getting used to that. So that does set up that new neural pathway to respond rather than react. So you have to train in a place, in an environment, and a time that is going to set you up for success when that negative stimulus does come, because it's going to come. It's going to come in some form or fashion.
Yeah. And that's what I say, right, about stimulus. And this is kind of the big picture, right? I mean, so stimulus is everything, and our perception of stimulus. And we're training ourselves, right? That's why at My Steady Mind, we create an ECR, an emotional control routine, right? Routines get results, right? And what we're doing is we're conditioning our body to automate this, so that at the onset of stress, I don't have to thank BAMO anymore. Like, as soon as my body feels stress, it takes the breath, right? It's automated. And so, I'll kind of walk through how, what I've done for example to just try to really, really get a handle on this, right? Is so I did 5 years of my life. I went through a pretty significant stimulus audit, meaning I did everything that I can. I know the only thing on the planet that I have 100% control over is me, right? That's all I have control over. And so I have to accept that fact, right? I can't control other people. I can't even control my kids. I can do things to influence, but I can't control them. It's our egos that makes us think we can control our spouse, control our kids, no, you can't. You can control
perception, right?
So
Another
what
perception.
I had to do is go through a 5-year process of really starting to eliminate any and all negative stimulus from my life that I could, be it people, including a divorce. I had to get rid of some negative family, negative friends. I had to give myself space, a gap, right? And not let that negative stuff out there that I can't control into my life, right? And I did this for like 5 years and got rid of I don't watch news. I don't, people are like, oh, you're on Facebook all the time. I'm like, I'm on there. I post something, I'm off. I don't know when the last time was I scrolled something, right? Not because I'm better than anyone, but just I have to protect my stuff.
Well, because you trained, because you began to realize that it's like, look, like this, this is not working for me. I need to do something different, and you have to take that. Yeah, I don't know what it takes for people sometimes to get to that point where it's just like, I need to begin to create distance from all of these negativities, biases within myself as well as with my life. And that goes for people, that goes for stimulus, news. Go ahead.
Where does your time and attention go? Right. And so, and I went through this pretty extensive, painful 5-year audit of really trying to get control, and really eliminate any and all negative stimulus from my life that I could. And
can I ask you, Seth, why was it painful? Can I ask you, just so I'm sorry to cut you off, why is it painful? Like, so just for people to clue in.
When I got divorced, I let a lot of people that I knew close to me just kind of like, I'm not like eliminating them, right? But I'm just, I don't respond anymore. I don't reach out. I don't talk to them. I don't, I don't watch news. I don't watch shit that, and there's just, I had a lot of stuff that, I like to sit around with a bunch of guilty pleasures and get online, so it was hard, it was hard to go through, a lot of relationships, things that I don't associate with anymore. Right. And I don't care if they call me, selfish or bass. I don't care. Right. That's not but I had to do what I had to do. But the big difference, the thing to understand is I went through that 5-year process of eliminating all this stimulus. And I know today that whole audit accounts for about 10% of the stimulus I'm going to be exposed to on a daily basis. So the training is, how do I defend myself against the 90% of stimulus I don't have control over?
Right.
Wow.
And so that's what the training's about. So you can get rid of all the stuff you can control, which is good, and I advise it, but you have to train yourself, because 90% of the stimulus you're going to get exposed to is shit you can't control. And so that's what the routines and the training is, so that we can go out into the world and be in control of our thoughts, emotions, and actions, regardless of what goes down.
Right. Well, it sounds like one perception we need to change is that perception, that illusion that we can control the environment, that we can control the world. And as soon as we begin to change, it's like everything is the only thing, what you said earlier, instead of like going outside and be like, oh, I can control this, that, and everything. And I know people like that kind of control everything. Whereas the only thing is the self that you can control.
Yeah.
And that's why
that's why I'm such a fan of Buddhism, right? Like I tell everybody, I'm not Buddhist, but I'm Buddhish, right? And literally the term emotional intelligence is the secular term for Buddhism. Daniel Goldman was a Buddhist, right? And so that's why I love Buddhism. It's all about emotional intelligence, right? It's a way of life. It's not a religion. Buddha was a guide, not a god. But anyway, he gets at the point, right? All Buddha wants to do is to end suffering, right? End suffering. Wow. And what causes all human suffering? Ego. Ego is the root of all suffering, right? And one of the analogies they use that they use in Buddhism is the two darts or the two arrows, right? So how they explain that, right, is if I'm sitting here minding my own business, and if somebody shot me with an arrow, right, there's a physical pain, the arrow penetrating the skin, breaking bones or whatever. There's a physical pain with that arrow shooting me, but that pain is short-lived, right? That pain will eventually kind of subside and kind of go away. But the pain that lasts forever is when my ego says, who the hell shot me? Why would somebody shoot me? The second arrow, boom, I ruminate. Why would somebody shoot me? Am I going to die? Am I going to, my ego kicks in, and that rumination is the second arrow that lasts. That's where we suffer for months, years past the actual event.
Right. And Rick Hansen, author of
Love Rick
Resilient and Buddha's Mind.
Brain.
Yeah, that's it. Buddha's Brain. He talks about those arrows, and he takes it down to every day where those arrows come into play, like something as trivial as getting up in the middle of the night and stubbing your toe on some piece of furniture. First arrow is you stubbed your toe on that piece of furniture. Second arrow is I'm so freaking stupid for stubbing my toe on that. And then you start to think that those negative thoughts.
Right. I told my wife to move that dresser 2 weeks ago. She said,
yes.
Again, instead of it's like, hoping the world meets my needs, and instead of taking responsibility, pushing responsibility to everybody else.
Right.
And
coming back to that control is because I just help people understand, like, man, why are things hard, especially like relationships, right? If you don't understand this stuff. And so one of the biggest killers, and some of your people out there might be experiencing this, right? But like if you're married or in a relationship, and I'm not a relationship expert, believe me, but I've just been, with what I do, I've been fortunate to be a part of a lot of relationships and work with people on their mind during these things and understand what subconscious stuff sabotages it. And because of the ego, one of the biggest ones in a relationship is what I call the if this, then that mindset. Right. Right. The if this, then that mindset. So what that means is if I'm married, right, and I have this thought that if I do this, she'll do that. This thought of I can control it, right? If I do this, she'll do that. If I take out the trash, mow the yard, she'll come and, we'll have sex tonight or whatever, right? I do this. And then I do this, this, and this, and she doesn't do that. And then all of a sudden I get resentful.
Right.
And that's where all relationships die, right? Resentment is like me drinking poison, but expecting the other person to die. Nobody else feels it. Nobody else feels it with me, right?
Yeah.
And so you just have to have awareness of these mindsets that are usually a result of trying to protect our ego that cause most of the negative shit in our life, ego and negativity bias. That's what we're up against.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so much
control,
of that drives reaction. It drives us into reactionary states, which we've already discussed can be harmful because that drives an action that is normally inappropriate.
Right. So the only way we can defend ourselves against all that negativity, bias, ego, control is literally by having that gap.
There you go.
Right. Then creating that gap, I know, from my own experience, meditation has helped me to widen that gap, to gain more self-control, to understand my perceptions of what I thought is reality when it's like, it's not. Also, it allows me to just be more responsible for my actions, for what I'm speaking, what I'm doing, how I'm feeling as well. And, what are some other, ways that people can begin to create this distance and begin to change the perception and kind of or widen that gap or begin to create that gap
it's a lot of the stuff that you hear people talk about, journaling is a big way,
that helps
what you're trying to do to create that space, right? What we're talking about, the thing that we're really helping people develop is what we call metacognition, which means thinking about your thinking. Right.
Yeah.
And so in order for me in sports psychology and a lot of the stuff like that we're trying to do is most people live their whole life and they keep everything in here. Right. Every thought, every worry, every goal, every dream, is just in here. And we got voices. It's very loud if I keep things in here and it's very stressful. Right. So what we're trying to do is get a different perspective, a different vantage point on what goes on in here. Right. And if I can write down my journaling, if I can do gratitude journals, there's a cathartic release of literally taking something from here and writing it on a pencil and seeing it on a piece of paper, right? And then I can see it from a different vantage point. I can study it. I can do something with it, right? And so, all this stuff that we practice in mindfulness, whether it's meditation, journaling,
breathing, taking a walk,
right? It's just if we can slow down, do things with intention, right? And pause every now and again. And again, it's not perfection. Believe me, I can still get up and yell at my kids. I can still get up and get pissed off. I can still be depressed. I'm human. But it's all about having the tools and the awareness to make that happen less often.
Right.
Yeah.
That's the goal, right? progress and probability, never perfection.
Yeah. And it's practice. It's practice. It's practice. It's practice. It's like it's every day. Just what I've learned and what we continually, what we study, what we talk about is just a little, even if just 5 minutes a day.
Micro habits.
Micro habits. And that'll start to grow into more and more and more practices, as well as widening that gap, which is so incredibly important. And I think you can really start a lot of these. There's so many ways just by sitting down for a few minutes and just getting control of your breath, just getting in touch with your breath. I mean, how are you going to be able to do BAMO if you've never taken a deep breath before?
Right.
You know what I mean?
And it's amazing. I mean, there's studies and stuff. I mean, like a lot of people out there, maybe some of your listeners, I mean, they may be 30, 40, 50 years old and they've never taken a deep breath. They've never, they truly have never breathed deep enough in to hit the diaphragm, because what we're trying to do, again, the nervous system, right? We're trying to activate and spend more time in parasympathetic, rest and digest. And the only way I can do that is I've got to take a breath in deep enough to hit my diaphragm so it sends a signal to the vagus nerve to activate that. And I mean, there's people that are 50 years old that have had maybe good careers or whatever. And the first time they go and they hit that, they're like, what the hell was that?
Yeah. I've been in meetings with teaching breath with people. And like we're doing like a step breath. So like inhaling, like stepping up. So inhaling 2 seconds on the bottom, inhale, pause, take a middle, breathe in the middle, breathe the top, and then letting that breath go all out. And this one guy in this, I was working with a PR company, and we're just doing this very simple breathe. I mean, we've been doing this for a long time, so I think it's very simple, but it's still very effective regardless of how often I've done it. But he, like, after just doing like 5 or 6 rounds of this breathing, he's like, whoa, he's like, I don't know if I can get up. Like he just he got completely disoriented and all we did was breathe. And I was like, wow. I mean, that's how incredibly powerful those first few times that if you that's why we do some of the breathing and grounding practices here as well, to get people in touch with that instrument. It's like, it is one of the, it's kind of the key in a lot of ways. It opens up the door to all the mindfulness things we're talking about, is just getting in touch with our breath. Because we can get in touch with our breath, I can get in touch with myself. I get in touch with my breath. I can find out where I am. If I know where I am, then I can know what the stimulus is, and then what can I do about it?
Right. And the reason we use our breath, right? Because the reason most people, and I know we're coming up on time and I got to be done here in a few minutes, but the reason a lot of this anxiety and stuff, is because people are just, again, the two things that control everything, right? Your thoughts, which control your mind, your breath, which controls your nervous system. And so most people have no awareness or control over either. So they're just, thoughts are always ruminating, time traveling, right? And every thought requires energy. So they're exhausted because I'm just thinking and worrying and time traveling, right? And my breathing is very shallow, so I'm not getting oxygenated. I'm in sympathetic overdrive. Like, that's how people live and exist today, right? And if you can teach them to pause, right? And the reason all the meditation and everything focuses on the breath and bringing our attention back to the breath, because the breath is the only thing that's with us in the present moment.
Right.
And that's what most people do not live. They're not present, right? They're always somewhere else. And so, breath is powerful, but we just practice it, right? And it may suck at first. You may not be able to take a deep breath. You may not be able to breathe through your nose, right? You got to practice, and that's what I kind of tell, like me, now, I've done it long enough to where I've conditioned my body. Like I'm not a mouth breather. I breathe through my nose. About every breath I take, it goes down into my stomach, right? And I can be driving, doing good, right? And then all of a sudden I'll take a deep breath, and it's almost like I have to figure out what was about to piss me off. Like, hey,
exactly.
Oh, it's a song that reminded me, like my body's so conditioned to, at the onset of stress, it will take a breath. It doesn't mean I'm never going to get stressed, but little things that used to really throw me off, they don't faze me anymore.
Yeah. I remember a coach that I used to have, is he used to say, don't sweat the small stuff, and it's all small stuff.
Yeah.
Well, we make a big stuff by piling more shit on top of it.
We do.
Perceptions and getting emotional and taking wrong actions and feel guilty about those actions. It's like, there is an opportunity. And one thing, I'll end with this little quote that kind of is similar to what Viktor Frankl says. And this is Rumi. He goes, beyond the ideas of right doing and wrong doing, there is a field. I will meet you there. That's the gap. That's the gap in that field. The field of all possibilities, of the field of opportunity that, like we talked about with Jacko Wellick, and being, okay, good. You know what? Good puts me in a place of like possibility. That's
Right.
where we want to be. And that's why I love talking to you, Seth, and John. That's why we have this show, because there is huge opportunities here with mindfulness. If we just pause, if we take a couple breaths, if we start to practice a few minutes every day, right, just to get to know ourselves in a deeper way.
Right.
So thank you, Dr. Seth.
And lean into it and have fun with it and practice and go after it like it's training.
Yes,
right?
exactly.
That's what I'm
run a marathon.
Yeah, I mean, just like physical training, like, that's what this is. This mindfulness stuff, the stuff you guys are teaching and preaching. And, if people will do it, not just I'm just going to go do it. Like, go into it. I want, because I'm a performance guy, right? And that's what I want. I want people to understand. If you want to be, whether you're a Navy SEAL or a stay-at-home mom or whatever performance means to you, like, you have to do this. This is the edge, right? And it's going to help you not just in, on the job, but at home. And so it just takes training. But the cool thing I say out to everybody is, like, if I wanted to train my bicep, right, it may take 3 months of an hour at the gym, 5 days a week before I notice anything. Mental training, mindfulness training, you notice something in 5 minutes, right? Yeah. So our brain responds a lot faster thanks to neuroplasticity and just how badass the brain is. You just have to give it the right stuff, and you have to be consistent.
Right on.
That's it right there. Consistency.
Hey,
thanks, John.
Always a pleasure having you here, brother. I know you've got to bounce here in a second, so I just want to give you an opportunity to plug yourself and the work you're doing, and for our audience, and then we'll wrap it up with a grounding practice and call it done.
Yeah, I love it. Again, I'm always grateful to be on here and spend time with you guys. I love what you're doing at My Steady Mind and spreading the word. And so if people are interested in what we're doing, it's mysteadymind.com, www.mysteadymind.com. Everything that we talk about here is in an online course that anybody can go purchase and move yourself through. It's a 9-module course. Great course. I know both these guys have gone through it. So if your viewers want to do it, I give them the 25%. It's only $299 for the course, but I give you a 25% discount. So if they go to mysteadymind.com, click to enroll in the course, put in the coupon code MSM25, like My Steady Mind, MSM25, they'll get 25% off of it. And it's going to give you everything you need to do what we just talked about in this episode, right? But you have to go do it. So anyway, that's it. If you like, you can, I'm on social media, LinkedIn, Seth Hickerson. If anybody has questions, hit me up. And thanks again for having me. Seth at My Steady Mind, if they want to email me, Seth at My Steady Mind. So.
There you go.
Well, would you like to close with grounding practice for us, Dr. Seth? Would that be cool? Keep it rock and roll. Just do a couple breathing, like 1-2 minutes.
Bamo breath. Let's just do a couple Bamo breaths, right? Short and sweet. So the Bamo breath, we'll get situated. And what I teach when I talk about the Bamo breath, because again, we're trying to control our nervous system. So if I'm anxious or upset, my sympathetic nervous system is engaged. So the fastest way we can, I call it flipping the switch. We're trying to flip the switch from sympathetic to parasympathetic, the parachute, which is going to calm us down, even if it's just for half a second. The fastest way we can flip the switch is a 4-second inhalation through the nose, down into the belly, and then 4-second exhalation, right? We don't have to go do 3 minutes of box breathing, which is great, but we can just do this quick hitting breathing and move on. So I'll put your hand on your stomach, because I want people to feel the stomach, not the chest. You can put your hand on heart or stomach, but just on your stomach. And you can shut your eyes if you want, if you can. And I'll count the first one. I'll say go, and I'll count to 4. Make sure you're filling up the stomach. And then exhale. You don't have to hold it. Just exhale for 4 seconds. So what I want people to do is feel how their body, the sensations as they inhale when we're going into sympathetic, and as you exhale going into parasympathetic. Just feel it. You should feel a little cool wave rush through your body. That's your parasympathetic activating. All right. So relax and inhale through the nose, breathing into the belly. 2, 3, 4. Open your mouth and push the air out. Exhale. 1, 2, 3, 4. One more on your own. Very nice. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
So hopefully you felt that, right? That's what I want people to feel, that parasympathetic, that little cool wave. Now imagine if you're really stressed out and you did that, it would feel 1,000 times better. But Bama, get out there, practice it, breathe and move on.
There you go.
Wow. Thank you so much, Dr. Seth. Great. I mean, I always love having you on, lots of wisdom being spread through into our community today. So thank you. And
Pleasure.
Thanks, brother.
yeah.
Pleasure.
Great
All
having
right.
you. All right. Take care, everyone. And until
See ya.
next
Take care.
time.
Yeah. Hey, get your merch, guys. Merch sale ends November 7th. Seth, Dr. Seth, if you haven't got your merch yet, check out Men Talking Mindfulness, mentalkingmindfulness.com/merch to get your holiday. And all these items will be delivered in time for the holidays. So maybe get some for your loved ones. Spread the love, Men Talking Mindfulness. I think that's it, John.
That's it.
Thank you, Dr. Seth. Really appreciate having you.
You're welcome.
Peace.
See ya. Peace.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for joining Will and John on Men Talking Mindfulness. If you enjoyed the show, please like and share it with your friends and family, and please, we would appreciate a review too. Until next time, this has been Men Talking Mindfulness. Thanks for showing up.